I'll do my two.
Now the battle will be beginning in just a few minutes here. By my speed, we got about 8 minutes left, although they got different watches, so we'll see. If you're concerned about if you're in a good spot to see the battle, if you can see the field, you're in a good spot. The battle is going to be fluid. There's going to be motion across the field. Don't worry, you'll get to see something interesting out there. The British and alerting the camp of the impending attack. Now of note, I should point out the troops that are right in front of the church right now are soldiers of the 49th. Historically, the 49th were the soldiers who spearheaded the assault, led by Major Charles Plenderleith. They're easily identified by their green cuffs and collars. And when they came to Canada in 1803, they were led by a particular colonel by the name of Isaac Brock. The 49th served with great distinction throughout the war and is one of the true 1812 regiments when it comes to this history. Now, much of this initial fighting is an excellent example of skirmish fighting, small bodies of troops picking away at one another. The musket wasn't particularly accurate. Most of these weapons are smoothbore, which means accuracy is out the window. At a range of 100 yards, your margin of error was 9 feet in any direction. The other problem is these muskets are flintlocks, which means a piece of flint on the exterior of the musket strikes against a piece of steel to create a spark, which lands in a side dish called the pan. But don't worry, you get used to the artillery eventually, or you go deaf. So all of that being exposed on the outside means that misfire was a huge problem for the musket. Even in good conditions, 20% of the time, it might not work. If it's raining, snowing, or really windy, you have a stick rather than a musket. So it begs the question, how is this an effective weapon? Well, the simple fact of the matter is you already know. If you've seen in the movies or in textbooks those big long lines, the volley fire would help counteract the problems. The idea was that if you fire enough muskets, then enough of them are going to go off, that enough lead is going to go across the battlefield, that you're going to hit something. But fighting in this fashion produces a problem you are witnessing out on the field: smoke. Smoke in battles could get quite thick. Most battles, once fully engaged, you couldn't see your enemy until they were about 30 or 40 paces away. At Lundy's Lane, they were the distance I am from these fine folks here, and they could not see one another. So one of the questions we get asked all the time is, why on earth did the British, so vaunted as a great army, decide to wear bright red? Well, the fact of the matter is you wanted something that when you stepped out of the smoke screamed to half of the men, "I am a friend, do not shoot me." The Americans wore blue, made it easy to identify. Now what happens to the clever fellers who show up wearing gray or black or green? Well, they get shot. Because if you step out of the smoke and you don't know who's on the other side, you shoot them, because at least you get to survive. Friendly fire was a serious problem, not only during the Battle of Stoney Creek. At the Battle of Lundy's Lane I mentioned earlier, there was a Canadian regiment that lost more men to the British than to the Americans, because in the thick smoke, their green uniforms could not be identified. And in that same battle, gray-coated American troops for 20 minutes were being fired upon by both sides. So camouflage, great today. But 200 years ago, as they would put it, it could make you a landowner.
I think it's just a really big musket. Yeah.
if your musket is misfiring, there's different ways that you can try to fix it. One of the problems that can happen is where the pan ignites, but it doesn't travel through the touch hole. So you get a flash in the pan. You get a lot of flame, a lot of smoke, but nothing of consequence. You have to clean out your touch hole if you wanted to get to work. The other problem is if your flint has gone dull, you'll have to give it a new sharp edge. And you do this by taking a metal tool and tapping at the end. This is called napping your flint. And it's very important that if you're napping, that you do not let your enemy catch you. Because if you're napping your flint, you cannot shoot back. So as they would say then, don't get caught napping. Now I should ask, are there any good, proud Canadians in this crowd? Well, I want you to give a cheer because out on the field there is a regiment that historically was 100% Canadian. Fighting for the Americans. Oh, I gotcha. The Canadian Volunteers was a regiment raised out of the Niagara in 1813 out of disaffected Canadians, numbering 153 men. Their commanding officer actually was a sitting member of the legislature in York when he took his commission. So, you think you got problems with your politicians. He even burnt down his own constituency in December of 1813, the village of Newark. His name was Joseph Wilcox. The good news, he did meet his end. At the siege of Fort Erie, he was killed, and he got the perfect ending for a Canadian traitor, an unmarked grave in Buffalo. Now you'll notice as the lines are firing, they're not firing the entire line at once. The idea was that you would fire by companies and by groups. This would allow you to keep a constant rate of fire across the battlefield with the musket. In the hands of a well-trained soldier in this era, 20 seconds was the benchmark to load and fire your musket. Some were much quicker. I actually know a fellow who the fastest time he has been clocked is just under 8 seconds, so can be done. But as all of us know from group projects, you are only as fast as your slowest member, so 20 seconds will be the benchmark. Now the forces out on the field aren't just regular soldiers, they're also militia units out on the field. In Canada and the United States, the militia was pretty similar. If you're an able-bodied adult male, welcome to the militia. It was a part of citizenship. During peacetime, militia training usually consisted of coming to a fort or a depot on a holiday like the King's birthday over here or the 4th of July over there, and proving that you could do a little bit of drill and you could load and fire the musket. Usually it was a festival more so than a training day because they'd have fireworks for the kids, they'd have bands playing, and they'd have food and drink. In particular note, most forts offered free alcohol to any militiaman who successfully completed his duties. So, not a great training method, but when war breaks out, militia can be called up for service for any time from 30 days to an entire year. And during that time, they would receive proper training. Some of the Canadian militia, by the end of the war, were considered on par, if not better, than the British regular counterparts. One of the units out here in the Incorporated Militia of Upper Canada was actually noted in 1814 to be the best light infantryman in the British Army. So quite the compliment. Now, historically, the British were able to successfully surprise the Americans and began to push deeper and deeper into their camp. The darkness not only allowed them to get so close, but the poor layout of the American camp meant that many of the soldiers, when they formed up, were too far away to participate. Modern scholars have done research, and they estimate that over half of the over 3,000 Americans did not participate in the battle, instead standing to arms at their own camps out of the battle. But as the British pushed in, they began to take heavier and heavier casualties. The American forces at close range actually had a weapon that was devastating. Unlike the British, who fire a single solid lead ball, the Americans fired what was called buck and ball. It was a lead ball and 3 buckshot. Now that doesn't sound too bad, but within 50 yards, the buckshot will cause grievous wounds. Not enough to really put you out for a long time, but enough to put you out in that moment. And the British casualties began to rise higher and higher. And considering they had less than 1,000, and the Americans had just under 4,000, they had to preserve every soldier they could. And we see the British colors coming out on the field. Every regiment in the British Army was issued 2 colors by the Crown. The hand of the King was laid upon them, they said. And the colors were of particular note. They would mark a central point on the field for the regiment. Usually the commander would stick close to where the colors were, and a rallying point should the regiment begin to break. They were considered sacred by the regiment, and the men carrying it were instructed to defend them to the death or beyond. There is record of some absolute bravery of men defending the colors during this time period, including one British soldier at the age of 19 serving in Spain against the French. In the fighting over there, he was surrounded by French lancers who demanded he surrender the colors. He refused. They trampled him, they stabbed him, they cut off his right arm and gashed his head with a saber. He still didn't give it up. He tore the flag off the staff, holding it under his body, and refused to surrender it. Not only did he successfully defend the colors, he survived, living a long and fruitful life afterwards. Quite the story. I would be remiss if I didn't speak about the artillery up on the hill. The artillery was of particular concern during the Battle of Stoney Creek because at close range, artillery is a murderous device. At close range, they wouldn't fire the solid iron cannonball, but let me tell you, that alone was dangerous. Light guns like these have been tested and back at the time, and at a range of 400 yards, they could cleave through as many as 17 human beings. But at close range, you go to something deadlier, called case or canister shot. Imagine, if you will, a tin can or burlap sack filled with musket balls or grape-sized iron balls. When you fire it, you basically turn the cannon into a giant shotgun. When it flew at men, accounts of the time said it sounded like locusts descending upon the pharaohs of Egypt. And when it would strike men, it sounded like fabric being torn in 2. The men struck would be rendered indistinguishable from butchered horse flesh. The Americans had canister down those barrels. Some of them had double canister. And the British concern was that if the Americans opened up at such close range, they would cut huge bloody holes in their ranks.
I'm like
Now, with the threat of the cannon, the British had to make a decision on what they were going to do. So this decision came down to the men of the 49th, led by Sergeant Fraser. And the decision was made not to sit and wait to be slaughtered, but to charge headlong into the mouth of the enemy guns. Either they would be cut down, or they would gain glory, take the guns, and save the day for the rest of the army. Across the field, you'll hear the officers shouting orders up and down the lines of both the American and the British forces. Officers in both armies tend to come from a more privileged background simply because being an officer was too expensive for an average person. Officers were expected to purchase their own uniforms, weapons, equipment, almost everything. Some even brought their own kitchens and food along with them on the march. The wealth of the officers was well noted, but it begs the question, why spend all this money to get shot at? Well, for British soldiers, it was a case that being an officer, you could land, title, promotion, and become rich and powerful. For Americans, you could parlay it into political power. And an excellent example is the fact that 4 presidents came out of the War of 1812. You had William Henry Harrison with his victory at the Thames, Zachary Taylor defending Fort Stephenson on the frontier. You had Andrew Jackson with the Battle of New Orleans, and last but not least, serving under Andrew Jackson, Sam Houston. He became president of Texas, so it counts. Now, throughout the fighting, friendly fire was a problem in the smoke. During the Battle of Stoney Creek, we have one of 3 cavalry charges that take place during the war. And it was American cavalrymen charging in the dark, hacking and slashing away with their sabers, until to their shock and horror, they realized that in the confusion, they actually charged their own troops. This happened back and forth throughout the darkness. Even the bright uniforms wasn't enough to oftentimes give you that identification. And throughout the night, you also had the confusion that you were fighting a foe who spoke the same language. Challenges and counter-challenges filled the air as they tried to figure out where they were and who they were charging against. So now we see the British charging up the hill. Will Fraser's gamble pay off? To his luck and to the luck of the men of the 49th, the American commanders of the gun battery have been told to hold their fire. The fear of friendly fire led them to believe they might be firing upon their own men. They successfully overran the guns and in the process captured General Winder of the U.S. Army. The story goes that Fraser, with his bayonet still slicked with blood, leveled it at Winder, and Winder turned to him, leveled a pistol, and Fraser said, "If you stir, sir, you die." Winder surrendered. He would be one of 2 generals to surrender that day, leaving the American forces leaderless come the morning. Now, And not long after the taking of the guns, the British, realizing that the dawn was not far away and would reveal their small numbers, withdrew their forces back to the Burlington Heights. The next morning, the Americans looked at their losses, looked at their loss of command, and with an officers' council made the decision. They withdrew. This was the high water mark of the American invasions at Niagara. Never again would they get this far. And for the rest of the 1813 campaign, they would be penned up inside Fort George, surrounded by the British, the Canadian militia, and their Indigenous allies, holding them in place. But ladies and gentlemen, as the reenactors and myself, most of us are students of history, lovers of history, and we acknowledge that the ground we walk on, the uniforms we wear, and the people that we speak of, they were real people. They walked these grounds before us, and many fell on these grounds before us. We hold a deep reverence towards these people and a respect to them. It doesn't matter if they were Canadian, American, British, or Indigenous. We respect them all, and it's a tradition amongst our community that in honor of them and in respect to them, we end engagements with the playing of a lament. So I ask that during the playing of the lament, you please remove your caps if able and observe silence. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for all of the reenactors who have come out this weekend. Some have traveled quite the distance to be out here. Stoney Creek is an event that many of us reenactors love to come back again and again. A testament, this is my 20th anniversary of the first one I came out to, and I'll be back again and again and again. You keep having it, I'll keep coming out. Sometimes they might even take away the mic. Oh, I know. I got defenders. But ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you this evening. I'll stick around the edge of the fence if you do have any questions, comments, rude remarks. If you have any further questions that you'd like to ask the reenactors, simply wait until they get back into their camps. Let them kit down a bit. They might be a little bit hot and sweaty, but they love this. They have put a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of research to make sure that what they're doing is correct and looks good, so they are more than happy to share the information that they have put together. If you're interested in joining any of these units, the best way to do that is to talk to them. Find out about the units, find out about how they can get you kitted up, and find out how you too can be in wool on a field on a relatively lovely night like tonight. And just a reminder again, ladies and gentlemen, the fireworks are going to be going on. I'm more than likely going to say that because they said weather permitting, and this is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm willing to stake what little reputation I have that we are going to be doing that. But feel free to look through the camp. Feel free to enjoy yourself. And remember, tomorrow there will be even more things going on. So if you can make it out to that, I'd be happy to see you again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, you have yourself a lovely evening here at Stoney Creek.
You know she's little. She lay on the floor. She's got a pillow and a blanket. That's cool. Actually, I don't know. You know what? I just. She's like, see, I don't like that. I like to. I don't know what to talk about. Something like that. How old is but it was some other one. They had a walk, the Americans had a walk all this way to come in. Yeah, that was from yeah. They didn't come this way. They had to come all this way. I don't know what. So it's called so might be able to find it in each other. Yeah, I guess.
It's just there. I adjusted the fence for it. I don't think